The sky tore her from the helicopter in a blur of rain and betrayal, her wrists bound by steel, her trust shattered by the very men she once flew into battle beside. Plummeting through a midnight storm, Captain Nia Freeman was a ghost before she even hit the water. She had unearthed a rot that ran to the very top, a conspiracy her superiors would kill to protect. But they forgot one thing. They hadn't thrown a victim from that chopper. They had thrown a weapon. An elite pilot doesn't see a fall. She sees a controlled descent. She feels the wind not as an enemy, but as an airfoil. In that terrifying, weightless eternity between the sky and the sea, her training took over. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Survival was a mission she would not fail. Hello and welcome back. What's the most incredible story of survival you've ever heard? Share it in the comments below. And if you believe in the power of the human will to survive, hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping stories of justice. Now, let's go back to that moment in the storm and see how a fall of grace became the beginning of a legendary ascent.
The helicopter was a metal cage in a war with the sky. Every gust of wind slammed against the fuselage like a battering ram, the percussive thump, thump, thump of the rotor blades fighting a desperate, pulsating rhythm against the storm. Inside, the world was a chaotic blur of strobing emergency lights and the roar of straining turbines. Rain lashed against the small bolted windows, turning the night outside into a liquid abyss. And in the center of it all sat Captain Nia Freeman. Her wrists were bound behind her with thick, military-grade zip ties, the plastic cutting deep into her skin. Her ankles were similarly secured. She was a pilot, a creature of the sky, now rendered flightless and caged within her own element. But it wasn't the storm or the restraints that chilled her to the bone. It was the man sitting directly across from her, Commander Thorne. His face, a mask of calm in the chaos, was illuminated in brief, violent flashes of lightning. He was the man who had pinned her wings on her chest, the mentor who had taught her how to read the wind and trust her instruments, the man she had trusted with her life 100 times over. Now, his eyes, once a source of paternal pride, held nothing but cold, sterile finality. He was a stranger wearing the face of a friend. Her mind flashed back, a single, searing image from 48 hours ago. A darkened intelligence room, the quiet hum of a server, and the glowing screen of an encrypted terminal. She had been searching for a leak, a ghost selling flight plans and troop movements to the highest bidder. And then she found it. Not a ghost, but a name. Thorne. Account numbers, offshore transfers, coded messages. The rot wasn't at the fringes. It was at the very heart of the command. The man she revered was a traitor. Now, back in the belly of the beast, she met his gaze. The pulsating thrum of the rotors was a war drum counting down the final seconds of her life. "Why?" she mouthed over the engine's roar, the single word a shard of glass in her throat. Thorne leaned forward, his voice a low, steady hum that cut through the noise. "I was the best, Nia. Too good. You were never supposed to look in that file. You were never supposed to connect those dots." It wasn't an apology. It was a performance review. Her competence had become her death sentence. "The men we lost in Kandahar, that was you," she stated, the accusation hanging heavy and cold between them. A flicker of something, perhaps annoyance, crossed his face. "Soldiers die, Captain. It's the cost of doing business, a cost you are no longer willing to accept." He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to the two grim-faced soldiers flanking her. It was the only order he needed to give. They hauled her to her feet. The side door of the helicopter slid open with a deafening hydraulic hiss, and the storm exploded into the cabin. A furious, screaming vortex of wind and rain tore at them, ripping the air from their lungs. The world outside was a terrifying, bottomless chasm of churning black clouds and raging sea. Nia thought, her body a coiled spring of muscle and fury, but the restraints held her fast. The soldiers shoved her towards the open maw. She twisted, her eyes locking onto Thorne one last time. He hadn't moved. He just watched, his expression as placid as if he were observing a routine training exercise. "You should have stayed in your lane, Captain," he said, the words almost lost to the wind. Then they shoved. For one infinite, heart-stopping second, she was weightless. The pulsating roar of the helicopter was instantly replaced by the high-pitched scream of the wind. She saw the aircraft pull away, its red beacon a fading heartbeat in the storm, a final mocking goodbye. She was tumbling, a discarded thing thrown into the abyss. Rain stung her face like 1,000 tiny needles. The cold was absolute, a physical force that seemed to stop her heart. They thought they were throwing away a problem, a loose end, a woman who knew too much. They believed the ocean would swallow their secret whole. But as she fell, as the black, angry waves rushed up to meet her, something ancient and unbreakable inside her ignited. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Fear was a dead weight. Her pilot's mind, forged in 1,000 hours of high-G turns and stall recoveries, began to calculate. The fall wasn't an end. It was a descent. And every descent, she knew, could be controlled.
The ocean met her not with a splash, but with a concussive, bone-shattering impact. A wall of black, freezing water slammed into her, driving the air from her lungs in a single violent burst. Darkness consumed her. The weight of the sea was a physical presence, dragging her down into the crushing, silent depths. For a moment, there was nothing. No up, no down, just the suffocating cold and the roaring in her ears. But Nia Freemfurt was a creature of the sky, and her instincts were forged in the unforgiving physics of flight. In the abyss, her training screamed back to life. Disorientation is death. Find your vector. Instead of panicking, she let her body go limp, feeling for the subtle pull of buoyancy. There, a faint upward drift. She kicked, her bound legs fighting the current, her muscles screaming as she clawed her way back toward a surface she couldn't see. She broke through with a desperate gasp, her lungs burning as she inhaled the storm-ravaged air. A massive wave immediately crashed over her, shoving her back under. It was a brutal, violent cycle. Surface, breathe, submerge. She was a cork in a maelstrom, and survival was measured in single, stolen breaths. Through the stinging rain, she saw it. A dark shape rising and falling on the waves. Debris, a large, twisted panel of metal torn from a cargo ship, its edge a jagged, wicked-looking saw blade. Hope, fierce and ugly, surged through her. Using her legs, she propelled herself toward it, a grueling, exhausting battle against the current. She reached it, her fingers finding a hold on the cold, slick metal. The waves slammed her against it, but she held on. Her mind was a razor-sharp point of focus. The cuffs. They had to go. Hooking the thick plastic of her wrist restraints over a sharp, protruding edge of the metal, she waited. When the next powerful wave crested, she used its momentum, pulling with all her strength. The plastic strained, then snapped with a sickening crack, tearing a raw, bloody gash across her skin. The pain was excruciating, a bolt of white-hot lightning, but it was the most beautiful feeling in the world. It was the feeling of freedom. She clung to the debris as the storm raged through the night, a montage of endless waves, biting cold and sheer, bloody-minded willpower. When the first hint of a bruised gray dawn broke on the horizon, the storm had weakened, and through the mist she saw a faint dark line, a coastline. The
The swim to shore was the last of her reserves. She kicked weakly, her body a dead weight, until her feet finally scraped against sand and rock. She crawled from the surf, collapsing onto a desolate, wind-swept beach, coughing up salt water and blood until there was nothing left. Her salvation was a derelict fishing shack, slumped against the cliffs like a forgotten skeleton. Inside, she found a ghost of a life, a rusty knife, a tattered first aid kit with little more than gauze, and a forgotten bottle of water. With trembling hands, she cut the restraints from her ankles and cleaned the gash on her wrist, hissing as the antiseptic pad she found made the wound burn. Every flare of pain was a reminder, a fuel. Staring at her reflection in a cracked piece of glass, she saw a stranger, bruised, bloodied, but with eyes that burned with a cold, terrifying fire. She whispered a single name into the empty shack, a vow that was both a promise and a death sentence. Thorn. Her gaze fell upon an old battery-powered shortwave radio sitting on a dusty shelf, a long shot. She spent an hour tinkering with it, coaxing the corroded terminals back to life. Finally, with a crackle of static, it powered on. She tuned the dial, searching for a dead air frequency they had established years ago, a ghost protocol for emergencies that were never supposed to happen. She keyed the microphone. Valkyrie is down. I am using my old call sign. Repeat, Valkyrie is down, awaiting echo. She released the button and waited. The only sound was the hiss of static and the pounding of her own heart. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Had anyone heard? Was anyone even listening? Just as she was about to give up, a single, distorted word cut through the static, so faint it was almost a ghost on the airwaves. Echo. Cypher had heard. Her one trusted contact, a disavowed intelligence analyst who lived in the digital shadows, knew she was alive. Naya Freeman was dead. The ghost had just been born.
The static hissed for a long moment, and then the radio went dead. Cypher wouldn't respond again on an open channel. Naya knew the protocol. The response would be a signal, not a conversation. She spent the next hour scanning the emergency frequencies, listening to the disembodied voices of ship captains and coast guards. Then she heard it, a weather report, standard and routine, except for a single error in the broadcast, a sequence of numbers read out as barometric pressure, numbers that were, in fact, a set of GPS coordinates, a fishing harbor 80 miles down the coast. The journey was a blur of grit and determination. Naya stowed away on a rusty fishing trawler, hiding among nets that stank of diesel and salt, her hunger a dull ache she ignored. When the boat docked, she slipped away into the grimy labyrinth of the port city, a ghost in the crowd. The coordinates led her to a bustling, chaotic bus terminal, a river of anonymous faces. The target was a luggage locker, number 317. The key had been taped to the underside of a nearby payphone. Inside the locker was a worn duffel bag. It held no weapons of war, no high-powered explosives. It held something far more valuable, a new life. There was a stack of untraceable currency, a set of simple, durable civilian clothes, a burn phone, and a high-quality forged French passport and ID card bearing the name Amara Dubois. Tucked into a side pocket was a small, high-tech toolkit and a sealed evidence bag containing a single, encrypted micro SD card. Naya found a cheap, pay-by-the-hour motel room, a grimy box with a flickering fluorescent light. She plugged the SD card into the burn phone. There were no pleasantries from Cypher, only data, cold, hard, and lethal. A single dossier opened, and the information hit her like a physical blow. Target, Commander Thorn. Location, the Le Grand Saphir Hotel, Monaco. Event, Global Security Summit. Timeline, 72 hours. 72 hours. The clock had started ticking. Thorn wasn't just hiding. He was moving up. At the summit, he was set to finalize a multi-billion-dollar arms deal, selling advanced military drone technology to a rogue state, a deal that would make him untouchable. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about stopping a global catastrophe. There was no time to build a network, no time to gather allies. She had one shot. Her burn phone buzzed. A single text from Cipher. They're hiring event staff. Your profile has been submitted, and your uniform will be waiting. The motel room became a war room. The pace was frantic, a race against the dwindling hours. Cipher became her ghost in the machine, feeding her a constant stream of intel. The hotel's blueprints appeared on her phone screen, ventilation shafts, security camera blind spots, emergency exits. Next came the staff manifest for the summit's gala dinner, with the name Amara Dubois neatly inserted on the catering team. Then security patrol routes, detailed down to the second. Naya's transformation was swift and total. She stood in front of the bathroom's cracked mirror and took the rusty knife from the shack to her hair, hacking off her long braids until only a short, brutally shorn crop remained. She studied the face in the passport, memorizing the history of a woman who didn't exist. She practiced a new walk, a new posture. Not a soldier's ramrod straightness, but the slightly hurried, invisible shuffle of a service worker. Captain Naya Freeman was disappearing, being replaced by a ghost designed to be overlooked. She spread the blueprints across the stained motel bedspread, her fingers tracing routes, her mind a whirlwind of calculations. The pilot who could land a crippled jet in a crosswind was now plotting an attack with the same meticulous, life-or-death precision. This was her new flight plan. The summit's grand ballroom was the target. Thorne's keynote speech was the moment of impact. Her weapon wouldn't be a missile, it would be the truth. As the 72-hour clock bled away, she didn't sleep. She planned, she studied, she became Amara Dubois. When the final hour arrived, she stood before the mirror one last time. The woman staring back was a stranger. Her eyes were not the eyes of a victim. They were the cold, clear eyes of a hunter who had her prey locked in her sights. Her mission wasn't survival anymore. It was the hunt, and it was about to end.
The Le Grand Saphir Hotel wasn't just a building, it was a monument to power. Its lobby was a cathedral of marble and crystal, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and quiet, billion-dollar conversations. Men and women who moved armies and markets glided across the polished floors, their faces smooth masks of practiced diplomacy. And moving among them, unseen and invisible, was Amara Dubois. Dressed in the crisp black and white uniform of the catering staff, Nia Freeman was a ghost at the feast. She carried a tray of champagne glasses, her posture perfectly submissive, her eyes downcast. But behind that mask of servitude, her mind was a combat computer, processing everything. She mapped the exits, tracked the movements of Thorne's private security, and noted the precise location of the broadcast booth tucked away behind the main ballroom stage. The tension was a live wire. As she navigated the crowded pre-gala reception, she turned a corner and came face to face with a colonel who had served under Thorne, a man she'd shared a drink with a year ago. His eyes flickered over her, a flicker of vague recognition. Nia's heart hammered against her ribs, but her expression remained blank, impassive. "Excusez-moi, monsieur," she murmured in flawless French, stepping aside. The moment passed. The colonel dismissed her as just another server, his mind already back on his conversation. She was invisible. She was safe. Her target was a small, unassuming AV junction box behind a velvet curtain, the central nervous system for the entire summit's broadcast. During a moment of distraction, as the guests began filing into the ballroom, she slipped behind the curtain. Her fingers, deft and sure, pried open the panel. She pulled a small, sleek black device from her pocket, Cypher's masterpiece, and clipped it onto the primary data cable. It looked like a standard signal booster. No one would ever notice it. She closed the panel, smoothed the curtain, and melted back into the flow of the staff. The trap was set. The gala began. Commander Thorne, basking in the glow of his peers, took the stage to a round of thunderous applause. He stood at the podium, a portrait of military honor, and began his keynote speech on the future of global security. He spoke of integrity, of duty, of the sacrifices required to keep the world safe. Nia watched from the shadows at the back of the room, her hand clutching a small remote detonator in her pocket. The greatest threat, Thorne boomed, his voice resonating with false sincerity, is not from our enemies, but from the rot that can grow within our own ranks. Nia pressed the button. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, every massive screen in the ballroom, including the one directly behind Thorne, flickered. His face vanished, replaced by a bank statement showing a multi-million-dollar transfer from a known arms dealer. The room fell silent. Then the screen changed again, a satellite image of a U.S. military base overlaid with flight paths. A moment later, an audio file began to play. Thorne's own voice, captured on a secret recording, negotiating the sale of that very information. Pandemonium erupted. Shouts of confusion and outrage echoed through the grand ballroom. Thorne stood frozen at the podium, his face a ghastly shade of white, exposed and humiliated on a global stage as the live stream carried his treason to every corner of the world. In the chaos, Nia moved. She surged forward, a predator cutting through the panicked herd. Thorne's security team was disoriented, trying to protect him and control the crowd at the same time. Nia exploited their confusion, using the surging bodies as cover. Thorne spotted her, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. "You!" he hissed. He turned to run, but Nia was already there, blocking his escape. The fight was short, brutal, and ruthlessly efficient. Thorne was a commander, a politician in a uniform. Nia was a soldier. He threw a clumsy punch. She deflected it, stepping inside his guard. A sharp, precise strike to his throat, another to his knee. He staggered back, gasping. He reached for a ceremonial saber on a wall display, but she was faster. She disarmed him with a fluid wristlock and used his own momentum to slam him face first onto a catering table, the sound of shattering glass and silverware punctuating the chaos. He was not dead, but he was broken. She held him down, her knee pressed firmly into his back, just as the hotel's legitimate security forces, followed by armed Monaco police, stormed the room. "Commander Thorne," Nia said, her voice clear and cold, over his pained gasps, only for him to hear. "You are relieved of command." She stood up, turning the captured, disgraced traitor over to the authorities, and then melted back into the pandemonium before anyone could register who she was. Her mission was complete. It had never been about vengeance. It had been about justice. The sirens grew from a distant wail to a deafening chorus as Monaco's tactical police flooded the ballroom. They moved with precision, securing the exits and creating a perimeter around the chaos. Nia stood for a moment, an island of calm in the swirling storm of panicked socialites and flashing cameras. She looked down at the disgraced Commander Thorne, a pathetic, groaning heap amidst the wreckage of champagne flutes and shattered dignity. His reign was over. As the police commander approached, Nia didn't run. She stood her ground. From her pocket, she produced the micro SD card, Cypher's original data file. She held it out to the commander. "This is the master key," she said, her voice steady and clear. "It contains all the evidence, the bank transfers, the flight manifests, the names of every co-conspirator, everything you need." The commander took the card, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and confusion, looking from the card to the powerful man now being hauled to his feet in handcuffs. He opened his mouth to ask who she was, but Nia was already moving. Her mission was complete. It had never been about vengeance. A bullet would have been too simple, too merciful. It was about justice, and justice had been served not by a weapon, but by the undeniable, searing light of truth. Before the first news reporter could break through the police line and shout her name, she was gone. She slipped through a service corridor she had memorized from the blueprints, her server's uniform the perfect camouflage. She shed the blazer and apron in a small linen closet, revealing the simple, dark civilian clothes she wore underneath. By the time the world was asking who was she, Amara Dubois had ceased to exist. She emerged from a service exit into a quiet back alley as the sun began to hint at its rise over the Mediterranean. A black, unassuming sedan was waiting, its engine idling silently. The back door opened. Cypher, a shadowy figure seen only in silhouette, gave a single nod from the driver's seat. Nia got in without a word, and the car pulled away, melting into the pre-dawn traffic of the city. Her extraction was as clean and efficient as the infiltration. The final scene is not one of chaos, but of serene, hard-won peace. We are high above the clouds. The cockpit of a sleek private jet is bathed in the magnificent golden glow of a new day. At the controls, her hands moving with the familiar grace and confidence of a master pilot, sits Nia Freeman. She wears a simple flight jacket, her face calm, her eyes focused on the endless horizon before her. She is no longer tumbling through a storm. She is charting her own course through a clear and open sky. She pushes the throttle forward, and the jet climbs, a silver dart ascending into the heart of the sunrise. She is no longer falling. She is flying, utterly and completely on her own terms. Her purpose is restored. She has taken back the sky.
One person's courage can expose a system's corruption. Nia Freeman's fall from the sky was meant to be her end, but she turned it into the beginning of justice. If you were moved by her incredible story of survival and retribution, please share this video with someone who needs to see the power of fighting back. Don't forget to hit that like button to support our channel and subscribe to Black Lives Story for more powerful tales of justice served.